5,000 delegates from across the world will embark in the city for the conference, which runs until the 12th of November. Well, let's talk about what we can expect and hear whether the announcements will make any difference at all. So I'm joined now by the chairman of Climate Change Economy Group, E3G, a former government advisor on climate change, Tom Burke. Tom, welcome to the programme.
I know.
So, Tom, this, for me, you know, I saw them at the thing in Cornwall, which I've totally forgotten, the G7, I think it was, where they didn't wear masks and, you know, talked about climate change and all flew there via private jet. Which felt a bit of a nonsense. So what are we going to expect from them this time? Is it serious?
Oh, it's very serious, and we better hope it gets somewhere, because if it doesn't get somewhere, we're all going to be in a lot of trouble. I think three things need to come out of it. First thing we need to do is deliver on the promises that were made in Paris, especially 100 billion of additional money. There's a good chance we'll get to that. The second thing to do is people have got to up their targets to keep us if you like, close to the 1.5, 2 degrees that people are talking about. So we've got to get more out, particularly the countries like China, Brazil, India, that aren't doing enough.
But they're not going, are they?
Yeah, India's going, definitely.
China's not going.
Well, Xi isn't going, but Xi isn't coming personally. But we don't know yet whether he's going to come on video. But right. He didn't go to his own COP on biodiversity, which was in China. He hasn't left the country for 2 years. Right. So I wouldn't read too much into that. And then the third thing we've got to do is we've got to accelerate. So we've got to beyond the COP. It isn't going to be over. It's not a cup final. We've got to accelerate progress towards actually getting carbon out of our economy.
Why is it so important that we get carbon out? Just so for anyone listening, because we keep saying decarbonise, decarbonise, and we talk about it as though everyone understands why.
It's quite right, because the physics of carbon in the environment...
Nobody really knows anything, really.
Well, actually, you know, I don't know you're right about that.
See, this is it. This is the point. Everyone goes, oh, decarbonise, we need to get to net zero, carbon zero. Why?
Well, because all the weather, extreme weather we were looking at over the last 2 years is result of putting too much carbon into the atmosphere. So if we don't want more of that weather, and that just, if you keep putting the carbon in, exactly those sort of floods and droughts and fires that we've seen will go on getting worse. And then the consequences for food security, water security of those events will get worse, and so we'll destabilise the economy and we'll destabilise security around the world. So it is pretty important that we get this.
But since time began, so since, as far as we know, on the planet, we've had this sort of occurring in weather. There's been ice ages, there've been all sorts of different ages that have really been radical weather changes and radical changes on the planet. Are we being foolish to believe that we can actually have a proper impact on this?
Oh yeah, we'd be very foolish not to believe that we have.
So you think we can definitely have...
Look, you're absolutely right, Nana. Climate's changed over history, but history is a very long time. Right. Climate hasn't changed while civilization has been around. Climate's been stable for the whole period that human civilization has been here. So that's hundreds of thousands of years. We've done things in the last 200 years that are bringing about changes that are happening inside decades. So we've no experience.
But 200 years ago, we wouldn't have had the capacity to understand what we were doing to the planet in any case. No, so now we have more knowledge of what we're doing to the planet. I think that if we're looking at it, because I mean, look, years and years ago we had more coal, we were using way more polluting industries than we are now, and we certainly weren't thinking, even considering anything to do with recycling. So I'm looking at it thinking, well, we didn't have the facility to measure, so how is it now the statement that you just made?
Well, a couple of other things that were different. There are only about 1 billion of us on the planet then. There are 8 billion of us now.
We're like vermin, aren't we? We're vermin.
Well, you said that, not me. But there are 8 billion of us now. So 1 billion people could do things that 8 billion people can't do. Plus, we have a lot more impact because it's 8 billion tech-enhanced people on the planet now. And we're all a lot wealthier. Even the poorest people, in some sense, are better off than people were before. So they have more impact on the planet, so we have a bigger problem to deal with. And yeah, we've got lots of things that we can do about it. This is not a problem we can't solve.
Is it not, really you don't think we can't? Is it just not the evolution of life and the fact that ultimately the Earth finds its own homeostasis? So listen, the planet will survive, but we just won't.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more about that. The planet will survive. Yeah, it's civilization I'm worried about because I like it.
Yeah, well, I like it. I've looked at it and they said 2050, so it's like I'm thinking, I don't think I'll be will I be around? I don't know.
So no, but that's what's at stake. It's order. It's order and stability, which are things that everybody actually wants and needs in order to have a decent life. That's what's at stake.
So some of the announcements that they're expecting at COP, do you know any of them or what the main thing is?
Well, as I said, I think that the three things are we going to get to 100 billion? Are we going to get I would think somewhere 6 to 9 gigatons more carbon being taken out of the atmosphere. We're going to get agreement on that. Are we going to get agreement to meet more often? Because right now, in order to review how far we're getting, because the science keeps coming in worse every time we have a new report, and the science tells us it's worse and nastier than we thought it was. So are we going to then speed up the rate at which we review what we've done and work out whether we're going to do more or not?
Right. So the plans here are switching to electric cars. I know that's one of them. That's
one.
Although I think hydrogen, from what I've learned from hydrogen, that sounds like a better option. Or why don't we use something like biodiesel, which is we currently use the cars that we currently have, and use something that, I mean, there's all these different options. Why are they going for electricity, which could be powered by fossil fuels?
Why are we going for, well, it could be, but it shouldn't be, and it won't be. If we're going to meet our targets, it won't be. And we have alternative ways to provide the electricity, so that isn't a problem. The motor industry made up its mind, basically, at least for light cars, the kind of cars everybody uses every day, we're basically going to go electric for that, and I think that's the right thing. Yeah, I do. If you're looking at heavy trucks, aviation or ships, then I think we may need hydrogen or ammonia. There are different options out there. Aviation is going to be the tricky one.
Just think, don't use hydrogen, for goodness sake. Right.
No, not in an aeroplane.
No, don't do that, because then you've got diesel, hydrogen, you've got the Hindenburg. Right, let's bring in some of the others then, Lembit and Danny. I'm going to start with you, Lembit.
I admire Tom for one thing. He's a motorcyclist. And I salute you for that.
Absolutely.
The Motorcycle Action Group, welcome. That's probably where my agreement with Tom ends. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I don't believe that there is a climate emergency. Why do I not believe it? Because I don't believe, fundamentally, that CO2 is wrecking our climate. 2 examples. The medieval warm period and the Roman warm period, within the history of civilization, Tom, were warmer than we are now. We had the Dust Bowl of America in the 1930s, warmer than we are now. I simply don't buy this relationship with CO2. It's a trace gas. Second thing, I'm sometimes accused of being a climate change denier. I'm going to tell you, Tom, that you might be the climate change denier because you think we can stop the climate from changing. I just don't believe that's possible. And then there's the irony of it as well, of course. If we're going to take COP26 seriously, why are we flying 25,000 people here to tell us not to fly? It's just not credible. Why can't we use Zoom like everybody else?
Well, what do you think?
Well, you can tell Lembit used to be a politician, can't you? I mean, that's the cheap shot.
Look, leave that one as rhetorical, but what about science?
The reason, actually, interestingly enough, the reason is exactly, in a sense, like this show, because things work better when people are face-to-face than they do when they're on Zoom, and I'm rather glad we're not doing this on Zoom, which we had the option to do. And diplomacy particularly works better, because a lot of it depends on the relationships between people. So I'm not going to get worried about people flying to do it. I get a bit more worried about the Prime Minister flying around the country to what seem to be constituency meetings in a private jet, but that's a separate issue.
Now you're doing the cheap shot. Tom, thank you so much for joining us. It's lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much. That's Tom Burke. You're watching me, Nana Akwe, on GB News.